Young, brash and irreverent. Think youth, and the first brand that would come to your mind is probably Pepsi. A brand that wasn't afraid to take chances and is famed for its tongue-in-cheek communication. Pepsi's advertising had created a niche of its own, and with good reason. But if I ask you to jog your memory and think of a commercial the moment I say Pepsi, chances are you'd be transported way back in time to the early 90s and 2000s. For a brand that had a solid brand tone in place with campaigns like Ye Dil Mange More and Yahi Hai Right Choice Baby, the last few years seemed just about mediocre, with recent campaigns leaving the once upon a time Pepsi fan confused but more importantly disappointed. Tacky lines, overdone formats and communication that is detached from its core audience. Is this a conscious brand shift or an outcome of global creative mandates? Or is the Indian management just struggling to crack the Pepsi formula for advertising success? Nikita Saxena finds out.
In 1990, this brand proudly proclaimed, "Yahi hai right choice, baby."
Yahi hai right choice, baby.
In 1996, it won our hearts and our wallets with the tongue-in-cheek, "There's nothing official about it."
That's it, nothing official about it.
It gave our dreams wings when 20-odd masked Sachins told us, "Ye dil mange more." And it embraced our flaws when Shah Rukh Khan perpetually wailed, "Mera number kab aayega?" Pepsi wasn't just a brand that got its target audience right. It became one of them, young, unapologetic and edgy. Fast forward to 2013. As you watch a crazed Priyanka Chopra storm into a temple only to get swayed by a can of Pepsi, chances are your reaction will be the same as ours. Bewildered, confused and just a little disappointed. For a brand that churned one hit after another, changed the game, was probably Pepsi's last advertising coup.
The Pulty hit.
From the fresh-sounding Oye Bubbly to the insipid Oh Yes Abhi, where did the brand that defined iconic advertising disappear?
This is a brand that is so afraid of doing right that is doing wrong. It has lost its courage. By the time you do Oh Yes Abhi, today a 45-year-old is also saying Oh Yes Abhi. How can you appeal to a new generation by saying something that even a 50-year-old will find completely acceptable? And that is what has happened. I think it has forgotten that is intended to be the choice of the next generation, and you cannot be that without being willing to stick your middle finger in the air.
Not much dill left in the brand. It's become much more about your libido and your brain rather than about your heart. Priyanka ad especially is very guilty of being a manufacturer's ad, right? Even the one that came before it, the Ranbir ad. It's all about the Pepsi. These people have no other belief systems, and that's a little weird in today's generation when we have so many issues swirling around. A brand should say something more than "I am very good and I am for always."
Today youth are not about, they don't want to challenge establishments. They're not rebels. This brand's never been about that. This brand doesn't take itself too seriously.
If the 90s and early 2000s were about irreverent and effortless communication for Pepsi, then the years that followed were about a Pepsi that was trying too hard with ads like Youngistan that received flack, both from its target audience and other brands. While the brand made a radical shift with its foray into the uncharted territory of football and made a bold statement which changed the game, that breath of fresh air was short-lived. Barely 2 ads later, Pepsi went right back to playing the same game, shifting to cricket, Bollywood and treading the conventional once again.
What's really happened is, somewhere along the way, I think Pepsi has lost its mojo. At this point of time, I do get a feeling that, the effort to create something different is being tried, but I don't believe it's working. I think the key story, the key piece, the key creative, the key buzz, and the key pieces of irreverence that is needed in the Indian market hasn't been found by the brand as yet.
When you call an old man young, then he breathes, he sucks in his stomach, he sticks out his chest and he says, "Me? Are you talking to me?" You know, and he's really pleased. How do you aim a campaign at young people by saying, "Hey, you guys are young, we love you"? And they've lost it.
We're talking about a far more complex and fragmented environment that youth are operating in, both in terms of their lifestyle or their media choices. So I think for a brand to be relevant in today's day and age, I don't know whether it's relevant. It's enough to have a great piece of copy or advertising on offline media or traditional media.
Think Pepsi and your mind will run a blank, because this is a brand that today isn't clearly anti-establishment, and neither is it a family brand. Case in point being Pepsi's recently launched Pepsi Atom commercial, a mediocre attempt to spoof the market leader that does nothing but leave you blank and confused about what Atom is really about. Compare this to Coke, that has stuck by its positioning of being a brand that brings joy and cheer with its new Open Happiness campaign. Is it exciting? No. A little boring and cheesy? Maybe. But is it consistent and hence more effective? Yes.
This is a very interesting time because when we look at various consumer researches that we do across various markets, Indian youth clearly believe that there is an opportunity for them to create a change, to create an impact as far as society is concerned. And if that is the insight, the question that we asked ourselves on brand Coke is, how can we connect with Indian youth when it comes to the brand proposition that we have, which is to build optimism, which is to build positivity.
There is a certain voice that Coke has, and they continue to speak in that voice, sometimes interestingly, sometimes in a slightly ho-hum way. Again, admittedly, their current phase is not their creatively the most sparkling phase that they've been through, but they are speaking in their own voice. On the Pepsi front, you kind of fall between two stools, because you are neither setting the agenda, nor are you really, underlining a key aspect of the brand.
Proof of the pudding comes with Pepsi's market share figures. The brand has progressively dipped from 4.5 in 2007 and finally 3.3 in 2012. While the fragmented beverage market could be a factor and competitor Coca-Cola hasn't fared much better either, Pepsi's 26.6% dip in the market share is a definite cause for concern. Pepsi's confused positioning is not helped by its agency structure either. With both JWT and Taproot working on the same account and Pepsi constantly playing one against the other, there is bound to be some amount of confusion, lack of accountability, and hence fragmented advertising. But a key difference between the Pepsi of the 90s and now is largely to do with Pepsi itself. As the brand grew in scale, so did its procedures, resulting in heavy restrictions and rigid frameworks for its creative partners.
Things were a lot more spontaneous and organic. Things were not like, that it has to be researched and, gone through like 10 layers. When we used to make films with Prahlad, like at the shoot, while we are shooting something would come up and fearlessly one could just go in and do things, and so it was a lot more intuitive, but you operated on that kind of trust. Now it's not like that.
I refuse to believe that Pepsi as a client has become, over dictating and, become putting brand parameters that don't allow you to have, iconic advertising, because it's in the brand's DNA to create iconic advertising. If I was the servicing team on this business, would I push my creative team to write something more? Maybe yes.
Part of the problem can be attributed to the beverage sector at large, which has been stagnating in its communication for quite some time now. When the colas first entered the market post-liberalization, Pepsi and Coke weren't just thirst quenchers, they were a slice of foreign life. Today, these brands have to deal with over-familiarity and increased competition from sectors like auto and telecom that are moving up the advertising food chain.
Even Coke is not setting anything on fire, nor are in fact any of the beverages brands. So there is a category question, there is a certain fatigue, there is a certain, the role that the category plays in the life of consumers is not that vital. You know, it does not there. You know, it was an instrument of change. It was an agent of change. Today, it's a more regular part of our existence.
Today, Pepsi's ads run on a tried and tested diet of celebrity endorsements, exceptional production value, and a singular focus on displaying the product as much as possible. But what they lack is the signature Pepsi take on things that the brand was known for.
It would be nice for this brand to go back to taking a universal insight and bringing a Pepsi take on it. I think that's what makes Pepsi Pepsi.
Boy, Sachina, have a Pepsi.
In an era where opinions cannot be suppressed, judgments are made in less than a minute, and the youth's decibel levels are at an all-time high, Pepsi's subservience may cost it more than it bargained for.
Well, hope